Okay. All right, let's just get started. If people join, then they can come in. But we'll just get started with a little introduction. So hello, everyone. Welcome to Good Neighbors in the Middle East, Eyal, Dror at UConn. This meeting is being recorded. I'm sure it all prompted you that, but just a heads up, it's going to be posted on the Facebook afterwards. And if you would like the recording for any reason, just feel free to reach out to any of us to get a copy of it yourself. First, I want to thank you all for coming out here on this Sunday afternoon. It is 2 o'clock here, but it's actually 8 o'clock in Israel where Eyal is. And that was a surprise to me because I did not realize that daylight savings is happening here and not in Israel. So the originally planned time was 9 o'clock Israel time for Eyal. And about an hour before this, I realized that it was actually going to be 8 o'clock for him. So I called him frantically and was like, can you do an hour earlier in your time? And thankfully he could. So Eyal, thank you for being flexible. We are so happy and so privileged to have you here at UConn. The work that Eyal has done in Israel and in the Middle East has been incredible. And I'm sure we're all going to learn something very new, very powerful today. So I'm looking forward to hearing his message and sharing it with all of you guys. It really is a message of cooperation and of just resilience in the face of like really difficult circumstances. And Eyal will tell you all about that. So thank you all for being here. I want to quickly thank Eyal for being the kind of the machine behind all of this and helping this come together. It was through that collaboration, especially with Jackie. Thank you, Jackie. You have been an incredible resource, and Adina as well, to putting this together. So thank you guys so much. And to all of our wonderful co-sponsors who are listed on this flyer over here. Shout out to all of you guys. And I want to quickly thank Jordana, who is here today from Rimon, which is a student-led Israel education movement, who connected me and Eyal originally. So thank you, Jordana. You're the best. And I think we're going to see a lot of diversity of UConn students here from different groups of faculty members, community members, and people from different universities across the country. So I'm very happy to have all of you guys here today. So before we begin, I want to just go over some logistics, which I think is a very Israeli request. Eyal did ask that everyone have their cameras on if it's possible. I know it's not always possible, but he likes to be able to see his audience. I think it's very difficult to be a speaker in a time where Zoom is the only way we can do it, but I think that's kind of the best option we have now. So if you guys are able to, please put your cameras on so that Eyal can see who he is talking to and get a better feel for our audience here at UConn. Please do keep your microphones on mute during his presentation so that we're not distracting him. And once we get to the question and answer portion, I would love to have you guys either message my chat directly if you have a question that comes up during the presentation, and then I'll speak it once the question and answer portion comes up at the end. If not, you can type a message in the chat to everybody once the Q&A starts, or if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question yourself, also feel free to do that. I'm sure Eyal would appreciate that as well. So keep those in mind and feel free to message me if you have a question that comes up during the presentation. And I also just want to quickly say that this presentation is an example of cooperation between peoples of very different political and national identities. So with that in mind, I ask that we all keep that message close moving forward. This is not the time to argue about political differences, but to learn about building bridges. So with that, Eyal, I will unshare my screen so that you can take over and you can begin your presentation.
So good evening, everybody. Just before I will ask you the first question and introduce myself a little bit, I will just mention that I'm really, really, really happy to be here. Now, the reason is because you're Yukon. I see here some young faces, and I see here faces which are a little bit in my age and maybe a little bit older. So the young people, I don't know if you will recognize what I will say, but as a young teenager in Israel, when I was 16 years old in '93, um, it was the first Israeli player in the college. It was an Israeli from the Upper Galil named Doron Shefer, the Iceman, and he was playing at UConn with the Huskies. It was an amazing team with Ray Allen and Hall of Fame in the NBA, Donnie Marshall, and I really remember myself as a young adult watching, waking up at 4 a.m., 3 a.m. just to see the basketball, to see UConn. I didn't know where's Connecticut, but I remember the UConn. So when Gianna called me, I said for me it was an amazing. I will be the second Israeli on Connecticut. Yeah, I'm sure there is was a lot. So this is just why I'm so happy and excited to be here. And just before I will start, I want to ask you a question. As Jana mentioned, and as you could have seen in the flyer, I'm used to when I'm speaking with big audience, I'm wearing a suit. If you can see today, I'm not wearing a suit. It means that it is not a lecture. It's kind of a conversation, and of course, I will be more than happy while I will finish. That you will have the courage to ask me a question. I know that the American people are a little bit polite, not like us, the Israelis, but I will encourage you to be Israelis and don't be ashamed. Ask me the question. And if I will ask you a question, please, you can unmute yourself and answer. I think it will be helpful for everybody here. So here's my first one. If someone ever saved a person life? No, we don't have anybody here who had the opportunity, the privilege to save one's life.
I've done CPR on someone, but I don't think I like single-handedly saved their life.
Okay. How did you? But you give him first aid or something like this, if I understand correct. And how
Mhm.
did it feel?
I was nervous. There was a lot of adrenaline for sure. It was in a hospital setting, so there were a lot of people around. Yeah, I was nervous.
But when it when you finish doing it and you see that he came back to his life, like to react again, how did you feel?
I feel like I made a difference in someone's life. It was a good feeling.
Okay. So I can agree that this is a very unique feeling to save a person's life. I saved a couple of people's lives. You will know the numbers later on, but it doesn't matter the numbers. In our Bible, it's written that a person that saved one soul, it means that they saved the world, all the world. But here is my second question, and you don't need to answer about it. It's like a philosophy question, but believe me, nothing here is going to be. Not going to discuss with you philosophy, but I want, please, that you will think about this question during my speaking, and maybe you will find the answer in the end. I will give you mine. The second question is: do you think that there is something more important than saving lives? I see that Jackie say no. I will try to convince you, but it will be during my 25 minutes of speaking. I'm going to speak a little bit about myself. So Again, good evening. My name is Eyal Dror. I'm married to Michal and have three wonderful children. I'm living in the Upper Galil in kibbutz, a small kibbutz, small village named Sde Nehemiah. We can see Mount Hermon, the highest place in Israel, from my balcony, and the Jordan River is just 500 meters from our kibbutz. And I had a unique privilege to serve my country as an IDF officer for 24 years. I'm really proud about what I've done for my country. I'm a lieutenant colonel in my rank, and I retired a year and a half ago, and I'm now serving here. This is the rank of the Bashan division, the division that protecting the Israeli-Syrian border. I'm now a reserve officer in this brigade. Last year I served almost 50 days, and this year I don't think it will be less. And since I retired, basically, I'm doing four main things. First of all, I'm a husband and a father. You know, when you're serving the IDF, your time is not your own, your country calling you, meaning that you don't have weekends, celebration, birthday parties, holidays. You are on duty. So now I have the time to spend with my lovely family. The second thing is I'm telling the story of the Good Neighbor Project, the story that I will be very happy to share with you in the next minutes. I'm meeting delegation here in Israel, including people from the Gulf. I was in the US, I was in the UK before COVID. Hopefully 2021, I will be able to come back again to our normal life. I'm meeting students, parliament members, whatever you think. I'm speaking about the good neighbor. I'm speaking about the geopolitical situation on the north and the threats on Israel. I'm a student like some of you. I'm now writing my PhD at the University of Haifa. It's going to work about the inter-organizational collaboration and learning from crisis. And the case study, of course, is the Good Neighbor Project. And I recently finished writing my book in Hebrew. It will be hopefully, when it will be published in a couple of months, it will then also be translated to English. It's about 3 years I served in the Golan Heights. It's more than enough about myself. I'm going to start now. And I think that if I had just 1 minute to explain you the meaning of the Good Neighbor Project, probably I would have used this slide. A slide written in Arabic, drew by a Syrian boy. And it is written here, Shukran Israel al Musada wal Hub. In English, thank you, Israel, for the help and for the love. Something that was impossible a few years ago and become reasonable thanks to Operation Good Neighbor. And now let's see how Israel started this project. So for the people who are not familiar too much with the Middle East, and I'm sure most of you are familiar, here are our lovely country, the state of Israel, with the Arabic countries all around us. Here is Syria, 10 times bigger than Israel. Here is the Israeli-Syrian border. We will speak a little about this border in another 2 minutes. This is the place that our operation happened, the Israeli-Syrian border. And it started because internal issue in Syria. I'm sure that all of you heard about the Arab Spring. It began in Tunisia while some people started to protest against the regime, and it spread to Algeria, Egypt, Libya, also to Syria. Unfortunately for the Syrian, in these days, we're mentioning 10 years of a bloody civil war, a civil war that took the life of approximately 1 million human beings. 6 million Syrians are refugees. They had to escape from their homeland, from their homes, from their country, and they are living now all over us in some refugees camps in Turkey and Jordan. Some of them had the luck to reach Europe. Some of them even had a better luck and reach the US. You can see some of the damage caused by this civil war. I can tell you that it is terrible damages. Entire cities has been destroyed. But again, this is something that happened in Syria. How it was impact Israel? Well, here is the answer. Since the end of the 73 war, the terrible Yom Kippur War, until 2011, the Israeli-Syrian border for 40 years was very quiet. It means that it wasn't any single terror attack came from this border through Israel. Now, it's not that the regime, the Syrian regime, loved the state of Israel. We are still in a war situation with them. We have just a ceasefire agreement. We don't have any peace agreement with them. But because the capital of the Assad regime, Damascus, is just 40 kilometers from Israel, it's something like 25 miles, they prefer not to have a face-to-face combat against Israel, and they had their opportunities how to harm the state of Israel, but not from that border. What happened that because of the civil war, when people who fought against the regime, something strange, something challenging happened on the border. You can see it by this map. Okay, so here is the Israeli-Syrian border. Again, 100 kilometers, 60 miles. Here is a piece of Lebanon, the east part of Lebanon. People from you who reached the state of Israel and visited the Golan Heights, familiar with this spot. It's the Golan Heights, what you have just seen in the picture. What you can see basically here, this is the Mount Hermon, snowing Mount Hermon. And if you have visited Israel and if you have visited the Golan Heights, probably you climbed on Mount Bental. There is a fine coffee shop named Coffee Anan. I'm sure that you all remember. And you have taken observation to Syria. What happened here in Syria is the regime, which is marked here by red, had to escape from villages and cities. But when we are speaking about the Syrian regime, pay attention that from 2014, Syrian regime means also Iran and Hezbollah. The black spot is ISIS. You know, those nice people who admire the Jews, admire the Israelis. They are so admiring us. They have a strange way to show it by trying to cut our heads. But hey, those are the ISIS. So those ISIS were locating on the southern part of the Golan Heights. Here we have Israelis, approximately 10,000 Israelis living in some 20 villages. Try to imagine the Israeli mother opening her window here and observing that less than a mile she had ISIS. And on this green area, which our story, The Good Neighbor, happened, we also had a lot of kinds of rebel, people with weapons who fought against the regime. Some of them were extremists like Jabhat al-Nusra. This is my third question. Who are Jabhat al-Nusra? Please open your mics and give me the answer. Who are Jabhat al-Nusra? I'm challenging you because all of you are familiar with them, not with their Arabic name. I will give you a clue. The twins. 9/11. Who is Jabhat al-Nusra? My friends, Jabhat al-Nusra is Al-Qaeda. They are the Syrian branch of Al-Qaeda named Jabhat al-Nusra. So after 40 years of silence, what we have on this border, we had Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda, and ISIS, some of our bitter enemies, and it was quite challenging, but we are not going to focus about military solution. It's boring, believe me. Been there, done that all of my life. It's very, very boring. We are going to speak about something else. We are going to speak about human beings. We are going to speak about people, Syrian people, 250,000 Syrians who were living in this green area, and you can have a clue how they were living. Now, this picture and the next one, I read it from inside, from Syria. Please don't ask me when we will have the question. Please don't ask me how I got it. Probably I will not be able to answer, but I got it from inside. I would just say that, well, I didn't get them by Gmail or WhatsApp, but take a clue how people were living. People were living in a tents with lack of light, with lack of water. They almost didn't have nothing to eat. And this is a temporary hospital. Basically, this is an emergency room. Now, I will ask you, do you think that a person need some treatment in an emergency room reaching this whole can survive? Can do some of you want to take a chance and go to be treated in this emergency room? No. This was the reality during the 6 years of war. And the reason, because the Assad regime bombed his own citizens. He murdered brutally his own citizens because he wanted that they will surrender. And last one thing about the Syrians that we should remember, they were educated to hate us. They were educated to hate the Israel state, the Jews, the people living in Israel. They were educated that we are the enemy, that we are the devil, worse than human beings, that the only thing that the Israelis want is to conquer their land and kill them all. Now, I'm not dreaming, and I didn't read it in Google. I heard these testimonies from hundreds of Syrians I met. Basically, I think that I have met, I'm one of the person that met the many Syrians in Israel during this operation. Most of them told me this story. We're educated to hate you. This is what our parents told us. This was what our teachers told us. This was the Assad regime propaganda. By saying that in February 2013, something strange happened. Some 7 brave people or desperate people from Syria reached the border fence and asked for help from the Israeli soldiers. Now, when I'm speaking about Israeli soldiers, and I assume that some of you know the fact that in Israel, every boy and girl, when they are reaching 18, must serve, meaning those soldiers were younger than all of you. And they suddenly saw 7 people reaching the border fence, asking for them for help. The most reasonable thing was maybe to shoot them. But the Israeli soldiers asked a permission from their commanders and opened the border fence because they saw those people are injured, and they knew that if they will not get first aid and then will be taken to a hospital, they will be probably lose their lives. Since that night, 4,500 Syrian people, when I'm saying Syrian people, I'm speaking about men and women and children. You can see this boy here on the right picture, were treated in Israel. Regarding this picture, I can tell you that it is one of my worst nights, because he reached from with his family. They were almost burned to death because their home has been collapsed after getting shot, targeted by the regime. And we had to call a helicopter to evacuate him to one of the hospitals in the middle of Israel, in Tel Aviv, because the hospitals in the north couldn't have handled with such severe injuries. We saved his life. 4,500 wounded, 99.9% of them, the Israelis doctors, the Israeli medical team. And when I'm speaking about the Israeli medical teams, it's not the Jewish doctors, it's the Jewish doctor, it's the Muslim, the Arab Muslims doctor, it's the Druze nurses, it's the Badu, the Cherkess, all kind of the society in Israel. We are all living together in the north of Israel, and they were all treating the Syrians, saved their lives, and the Syrians asked for more. After 3 years, and in 2016, the IDF decided to establish a new project in the IDF, a new unit, the Good Neighbor Unit. I had a unique privilege. I didn't know it at that days. I got a unique privilege, one of a lifetime opportunity to change my world and to try to change a little bit other people's world, other people's lives. My mission was to think 24/7 about the enemy. Or let me rephrase it, to think 24/7 about people, human beings living in an enemy country. My mission was to increase dramatically the humanitarian aid to the Syrian side. Let's dig inside. I want to share with you one of our operations. For me, it was the most excited one, the doctor's visit operation. Let's take a look on this slide. You can see here the fence, you can see the Syrian, and you can see one of my soldiers meeting on the fence. Now, pay attention that when I'm on the border fence, it's a huge risk for my life. This border fence, like I mentioned before, is controlled from the other side by Hezbollah, by ISIS, by Al Qaeda. We knew, and it is not a secret operation. Believe me, I know what is a secret operation. This is not a secret operation. When you are acting 700 humanitarian operations, it cannot be a secret. When you are doing it in 2 years, it means that every night you are doing between 2 to 3 and sometimes 4 operations. It is not a secret. The enemy can decide whether he wants to shoot you, to launch a missile, or to make a suicide bomber operation against you. So it's a huge risk for my life and for my soldier lives, but we chose to do this in order to help them. And this was the mission, to take the children. Doctor's visit wasn't handling with wounded. He was handling with children, just with children, from the day they were born until the age of 16. Children who are suffering from chronic diseases like diabetic, like urologic problem, orthopedic problem, something that in our world, yours and mine, you need to go to an expert doctor and you can continue your normal life. In Syria, it doesn't happen. You don't have doctors. You don't have hospitals. You don't have any medications. So this was the mission. Why it was so exciting? Because we had the opportunity to meet the Syrian children. I want to share with you 2 or 3 thoughts about Syrian children. Syrian children always smell like a bonfire. It's something that it's not going out from your nose. They're smelling like a bonfire. It's a terrible thing to say, but this was the reality. When you are living in a tent in the Golan Heights, you don't have any heat warmers, and the temperature is below 0, it's freezing. You had to light a bonfire in order to warm yourself. Unfortunately, you also don't have water. You cannot take a shower every day, not even every week. This is the smell. And Syrian children, when they are playing, and it wasn't part of my mission, of course, but when you're meeting with children, you want to play with them. We had 12 hours in the hospital, so it's better that we will communicate. Some of it was to play football with them. And they were running and they were falling, and they weren't crying. Now, my children, they are brave, but when they are falling, sometimes they cry. I asked one of the Syrian mothers why your boy is not crying. And her answer shocked me, because she told me he's not crying because he knows that nobody cares. He knows that nobody cares. I don't know how many of you read Holocaust survivor testimonies. And of course, I'm not going to compare between these 2 events. My grandma and grandpa ran away from Europe at the Holocaust time. And when I read some testimonies of Jewish people survived, they spoke about this. The Jewish children didn't cry at the Holocaust from their reasons. So for me as an Israeli, as a proud Israeli, when I saw this, when I got the answer, it automatically took me back to the Holocaust of our people. And Syrian boy, this is the boy. Ask him a very simple question in English, in Arabic, of course. I asked him, when you will be adult, what do you want to do with your life? A very simple question. Now, I'm sure that some of you here, the students, I don't know if you know exactly what you are going to do with your life, but you have, for sure, you have thoughts. This boy wasn't response. And I asked him again. And just on the third time, he told me, I will not be an adult. I will die in a year or two. Again, it was shocking. And I asked him why. And he told me this is what happened to my friends. This is what happened in Syria. So Syrian children do not cry because nobody cares and they cannot see their future. This is how hard this operation was. But I told you that it was the most exciting operation. And here is the reason why. Because when we had the opportunity to see them smiling after we played with them, we realized that we are doing the right thing to do as human beings. It doesn't mean politics. It doesn't involve Jewish, Muslims, Syrians, Israelis. We are all human beings. It was the right thing to do. And regarding my second question, is there is something more important than saving life? Here is my first clue. This picture is the first clue. Now, 1,400 children smiled thanks to the state of Israel. 1,400 children treated in Israel in 72 doctors' visits operation. And the operation became bigger. And we had to collaborate with some NGOs. Some of them were Israelis and Jewish. Some of them were Christians and even Muslims. I just told Jackie and Gianna that one of my best colleagues were from Connecticut, from New Haven. He's the manager of a Syrian NGO named Rahma, Syrian American NGO named Rahma. And we worked a lot together. When I was visiting New York a year and a half ago, I visited him and his family at his home. But I want to tell you about some Christian organization named Friendships Unlimited. They are from Louisiana. And they built this amazing camp on the other side of the fence. Now, this was a field clinic, giving a basic treatment like a family doctor, something that I'm sure that all of you need 1 day to 2 days until you will be able to get an appointment. Basically, this is how it is in Israel. I hope that it's the same here in the US. In Syria, you don't have any family doctor. So they gave them the antibiotics and they gave them just some medicines. But if you are speaking about the second clue for my question, they also build an amazing playground for the children. And the Syrian children had the opportunity just for a couple of hours to act like children. They had the opportunity to eat ice cream. Can you imagine a life without eating ice cream? I cannot. This girl, it was the first time for her eating ice cream. This boy, it was the first time for him playing with a teddy bear, a huge teddy bear. 8,000 Syrians were treated in this camp. And the operation wasn't just medical aid. It was also to provide clothes and coats. Now, when we're speaking about coats, for us, well, it's very fun to get a new coat. When you're living in the snow in a tent without heat warmer, a coat will save your life. It's such simple. Calculate, please, because I cannot. Calculate how many lives we have saved by providing 350 tons of coats. And here is the result. Syrian girls in refugee camps near the border can warm themselves a little bit in the winter time. and it was delivered food and baby powder, baby powder, milk, and medicines and medical equipment, and diesel fuel, 1 million liter diesel fuel, 700 times. We chose to risk our lives in order to help those Syrians. Doesn't matter if it was snowing, foggy, winter time. If it was holidays, we were acting night by night, every night, sometimes a couple of times every night. And the operation came to an end 3 years ago in the summer of 2018. Due to the help of the Russians from the end of 2015, the Assad regime reconquered the area of Syria. It began in Aleppo up on the north, and they spread to Hama and Homs and other cities in Syria that were conquered before by the rebels. And they reached the area of Quneitra and Dara in June 2018. It was 6 weeks of heavy bombing. And before they reconquered the area, we had the opportunity for one last operation: the rescue of the white helmets people. The white helmets were civilians. When the war started, they were trained in Jordan, sponsored by some countries, including the US. And the mission was to save lives. They were the first to reach every place in Syria that bombed by the regime, and they saved civilians' life. Unfortunately for them, they exposed the word that the regime is using gas and that the regime is doing crimes against humanity. So they were all condemned to death. In our region, it was a couple of hundreds of them. Now, we didn't collaborate with them during the operation times, but when the regime reconquered the area, our prime minister got some requests, including from the former president of the US, the prime minister of Canada, UK was involved, France, Germany, and they asked the state of Israel to rescue those white helmets people. The reason that they couldn't have escaped for Jordan, it was because the passages between Jordan and Syria was already conquered by the Syrian regime. So we opened the border fence for a whole night. I told you about how risky it was to be on the fence. Usually, our operations was between 20 to 90 minutes. Here we had 10 hours that this border was open. And over than 400 people crossed to the state of Israel that night. My role was to coordinate with the Syrian people, with people I didn't communicate before, and to guide them to this passage, to let them cross to Israel. It was amazing for us standing there to see them in Syria, in their homeland, gripping of fear, and crossing to Israel, that country that just a couple of years ago was perceived as the biggest enemy, and they were smiling. Fathers and mothers, children and babies, they were smiling because they knew that their lives has been saved. And Israel took them by buses to Jordan. They crossed between Israel, the international passage between Israel and Jordan, and they crossed Jordan, and there they have been treated by the countries, by the representative of the countries that sponsor them. They're all now living among us with new identities, new lives, but they know that they are living thanks to the city of Israel. And just before I will finish, people ask me, was it worth it? And from time to time, I heard people saying, it is the Syrians, they will forget. I will challenge it. I will challenge it with this picture. The flag of Israel. And there is two words written here in Arabic. The first one is Wiham. It's an Arabic name for a girl. it is not spelling correctly. But when you are a 9 years old girl living in Syria, you didn't live one day, you didn't learn one day in school, you don't even know how to write correctly your name. Wiham was a 9 years old girl and she was suffering from severe diabetic. She reached the border fence and we evacuated her to Ziv Hospital in Safad. And she was hospitalized for 6 months. The Israeli doctors told me that 24 hours later, it was a delay of just 24 hours, she wouldn't have survived. But they fought on her and they saved her lives. And just before she go back to Syria, she chose to draw the flag of Israel, to write her name with the international sign, well, you know of what. And she wrote another word. She wrote it Abu Yaqub, the father of Jacob. But she wasn't a religious girl. My friends, Abu Yaqub was my Arabic name. This is how I was perceived to the Syrians. So the flag of Israel, drew by a Syrian girl dedicated to an IDF officer that saved her life, something that was impossible a few years ago and become reasonable thanks to Operation Good Neighbor, I can assure you, and I'm not a naive, we will not forget the state of Israel. The white helmets will not forget the state of Israel, and 250,000 people will not forget the state of Israel. And just before I will finish and I will open it for question, if you will ask me if there is something more important than saving lives, until 4 years ago, probably I would have told you no, there isn't. As a person who saved lives, I think, and this is again just my thought, that there is one thing that is even more important than saving life, is to give hope to a person in need. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure for me. And now the stick is going back to Gianna, and I will be very happy to answer your question. Thank you very much.
Eyal, thank you so much. That was incredible. I think I can speak for everyone when I say that that was inspiring, and the work that you did was just so powerful and made a difference in so many lives where I think people didn't have hope for a difference to be made. So thank you for sharing that story. And I want to invite anyone here to please message a question to me in the chat or unmute yourself. I'll start off with one that I have so far. And then after that, if anyone wants to unmute, please feel free. So the first question that I have is two parts. What was the hardest part for you during this project, Eyal? And then what was the best part or the part that you're most proud of?
I will start with the second part. So the best part was to know that we are helping them. Now it was very complicated. I can say for personally that, for example, in my family, my father's cousin, he was also a lieutenant colonel. He was the commander of a battalion, and he lost his life here on Mount Hermon on the Yom Kippur War. So it was very complicated to help those people in the beginning. But what was amazing is the understanding that I'm an officer in the IDF, and my country and my army is doing such an incredible thing in order to help people. And it doesn't matter that they are living in an enemy country. So it was, of course, the most exciting, the most important, and the thing that I'm really most proud of it. Of course, the little stories like Wiham, like the boy that write us Shukran Israel, the hugs, the kisses, it was amazing. The hardest part was to see those children reaching from the border fence, sometimes in the winter nights, and they were barefoot with dirty clothes. to hear the stories, and to know that we cannot save them all. As much as we will want, we will not be able to provide help for all of them. And sometimes we will have to take hard decisions. For example, we decided that we will not be able to treat children, for example, with cancer. So those dilemmas, and when you see the poverty, you see how bad is their lives, and it's not their fault. So for us, it was very hard. And again, I'm speaking again about the children because, as I mentioned before, I have 3 little children, and when the time of this operation, they were 2, 3, and 6 years old. So I literally could have seen them when I met the Syrian children. So it was very, very hard moments. But again, when we got the smile, it make it from worst day to a very good one.
Thank you for that. And I want to invite anyone that wants to speak a question to raise your hand first, that we know that you want to speak. The first question I got in the chat was there ever a moment where you felt like the work that you were doing was obsolete or hopeless, or were there signs of progress as you started off the project to let you know that like you were going to be successful in what you were trying to do?
If you can repeat the question, please.
Absolutely, yeah. So during the time when you were starting off the project, was there any point where you felt like it was hopeless and you weren't going to be able to accomplish what you wanted to accomplish? Or were there signs of progress as you were starting the project off and continuing it?
So we started the project with a glorified failure. Our first operation was a totally failure, and it was a little very disappointed. I think that failure wasn't any option. Unsuccess wasn't an option. I think that we knew that we are working with something that is very new, and we will have some failures in the way. But I think that what we achieved, and it took us some time, it was far beyond of our imagination. Because in the beginning, we thought that we will be able to help just the villages that are located 1 to 2 kilometers from the border. We succeeded to reach over than 40 kilometers from the border. We succeeded to reach the biggest city of the area of Quneitra, including the city of Dara, which is the capital of this area. So I think that step by step, with a lot of ambitions, and although it was, of course, sometimes we fail and it wasn't success, I think that basically we knew that we are doing a very important issue for the state of Israel and for the people. So again, failure wasn't any option. And every time that we succeeded doing in something small, it gave us the courage to continue and the motivation to do another thing. I can tell you that, for example, the first operation of doctor's visit, in my eyes, well, it was a totally failure. The Syrians didn't think so. And then I got the perspective that we did our mission. We have a lot of to do in order to make it better. And we learn from our mistakes. But this was how we were moving forward, just by learning, just by understanding, just by trying to investigate every mistake and to not to let us, I will say it like discounts. Okay, we are doing it. It doesn't matter how hard it will be. We will not make our life easier. We will do it. We will make our efforts until it will be perfect. And I think that was why this operation was, in the end, when I summarize it, was a huge success.
I appreciate your honesty in talking about the failures that you did experience, because I think in work like that, there's definitely going to be a lot of failures before you see successes. So appreciate that. The next question is from Lawrence in the chat. He is asking, did Good Neighbor Project work with organizations such as Magen David Adom?
Okay, so I would just last note about failure. I can tell you, Gianna, that I learned, and this is how I'm trying to educate my children. This is how I educate my soldiers. That there is just one person who is never never fail in his life, and I'm not speaking about God. The only person who is not failing in his life is the person who is doing nothing. So I will personally prefer to fail 8 times and to succeed in the other 2 than do nothing. And I'm sure that, when you are learning from failure, this is how you can make progress. This is how this project was built. Now, we were working with hospitals in Israel, with the 3 hospitals in the north and with some in other parts, for example, in Haifa and Tel Aviv. Magen David's, from time to time, we were working with. They were helping us evacuating wounded, although most of them were evacuated in military ambulances, but in the way, not on the fence, of course, but in a place in Israel, they got those wounded and took them to the Israeli hospitals. We work with NGOs, Israeli NGOs, like IAF, International Aid. I remember, I forgot the name, sorry, but it was some Israeli organization that worked with us. So we had a lot of partners, we had a lot of colleagues in this project. It wasn't just the military. Of course, the military and my unit was in charge of it, but we had a lot of huge collaborations. We couldn't have done this by ourselves as IDF.
Awesome. Thank you for answering that question. So the next question I have is, I know the Good Neighbor Project wasn't able to continue because of the situation that unfolded in Syria. Is there any potential future for the Good Neighbor Project to continue doing any type of work, either in Syria, where it was happening originally, or elsewhere in the region with the same spirit in mind? Or if not, can it be a model for other initiatives to follow?
So, unfortunately, in Syria, I cannot see it happening in the coming years because the Syrian regime is there now and it's against the state of Israel. By saying that, I can say that in the Middle East, you can never say never. This regime will be changing. I don't know if it's soon or not, but again, it's a whole other conversation, but I think it will be changed. And maybe we will have the opportunity. I can tell you that I'm sure that if we will have the opportunity, we will be more than happy to provide them help. We are doing humanitarian aid, and again, the IDF is not, of course, an humanitarian organization. We are army, and our mission is to protect our citizens, our country, but the IDF is leading also humanitarian projects in Gaza, on the Gaza border, and in Judea and Samaria. Just recently, in the last week, Israel started to vaccinate 100,000, excuse me, Palestinians. They should have been vaccinated by the PA, but they didn't do so. So Israel decided to do so because they're working in Israel. The American team, for example, the Friendships Unlimited, when they shut down the clinic in the Syrian border, they are now in these days, they are gonna reopen it in Gaza, on the Israeli-Gaza border. They have there an amazing project, bigger than it was in Syria. Of course, the geopolitical situation is very different, and they have their a hard time to do so, but they're optimistic, and I just recently spoke with them. They are really hope that in the next coming days they will do so. And I will add that the IDF, as much as I know, is the only army in the world that wherever there is a humanitarian crisis over the world, the IDF sending delegations. It was in Tahiti and Haiti, and just 4 days ago, a big delegation flew to Guinea. It is in the middle of Africa. There was some explosions there in one of the military bases, and there were hundreds of people lost their lives. And we have now in these days Israeli doctors and a medical team there in the middle of Africa. So almost every place in the world, even in Turkey a couple of years ago, although the relationship with Erdogan is not amazing, but when there is a crisis, the world knows that the IDF has the ability to reach every place very quickly. We are very trained with this. We are very qualified with this. So the IDF is flying all over. And I just mentioned a couple of places that the IDF were in 3 weeks, 3 months ago. It was in Honduras, which had there, I think, an earthquake or cyclone. So the IDF is doing some humanitarian project, although again, it's not our main mission, of course.
Thank you for answering that. I want to just give everyone one last opportunity. If you want to ask a question, please raise your hand now. If not, I will ask a final question to be mindful of everyone with time. Okay, if not, then here's one last question for you, Eyal. A lot of people here are either current healthcare providers, future healthcare providers, or might be looking to do humanitarian work in the future, or human rights work in the future. What advice would you have to people pursuing these fields as they move forward?
So the only thing that I learned from my work is that if you will do so, it won't change just the lives of the people that you will help them. It will change your own life. I can tell you that it changed my life, my perspective about the life. I was so amazed that a week ago I was picking up my boy from his garden. He's 6 years old, and his kindergarten told us that they learned to appreciate. They had a lesson in the garden, and this was speaking about to helping the need and to appreciate. And my young boy said, "My daddy also helped people in need. He helped the Syrians. He provided tents." And when she told me, I was so proud because I understood that what I'm trying to educate my children, well, they understand it. So I can tell you that a person who will do so will help his life, and his life will be changing even more than the life of the people that he will do so. Today, I'm doing, of course, volunteering some aid to groups in Israel. And again, it's a life changing. You learn to appreciate what you have. Most of us, unfortunately, especially the young people, most of us do not appreciate what we have. I recently read that if you had a home and if you had shoes and if something to eat, you are richer than 80% of the world. And of course, you cannot. You said that this was something that, well, I don't know, the Dalai Lama said that it's not a real word, but when you're exposing 3 years of good neighbor, understanding how people are living, you really appreciate what you have. So it can change a little bit your life, and I think that it is amazing. And of course, it's very, very important to help the people in need. Like my grandma always said, please, let's be on the side that give and not need to get. So I think that is a good motto for life. And again, giving hope to people can make you feel very satisfied, very happy, and give you the motivation to continue doing this.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eyal, and thank you so much for being here to speak to us today. I will say the first time that we spoke, when Jordana first connected us, this is something that I want to do in the future, medical humanitarian work. So I was like freaking out. I heard about the project beforehand, and I was so excited to get to talk to you. And I was just shocked, like, by the fact that I was saying, like, you did, like, you're a hero. You did incredible work and made a difference in thousands of people's lives, of people thought that change could not happen. And you were just so humble. You were like, I did what I had to do. This was just my job, and that was just what had to be done. And I think your answers today really did speak to that, to say, like, you did what you had to do, but the work that you did was phenomenal. And I want to thank you for sharing this message with everyone here today, and to everyone who joined us for the past hour. Thank you all so much. Again, this recording is going to be posted on the Facebook group, and probably on the Halal or Husky Pack Instagram as well. So if anyone wants to refer to it, please let me know if you want a copy of it as well. I'll put his contact information up in the last slide. And if you missed it, please reach out to me if you'd like to contact him in any capacity. So thank you, and thank you to Halal for helping putting this together. Eyal, if you have anything else to say, let me know. Or if anyone else wants to add a comment, go ahead.
So I will just ask you from you, first of all, thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate the opportunity. And again, it's Yukon. So for me, it's, as I told you, like closing a circle. Thank you all. I will just ask you one thing. I think that this operation was very important. Eyal, it's not the issue, believe me. The project is the issue. What the state of Israel did for people in need is the issue. And what I will ask you is to continue sharing this message. You can do it by following my Twitter or Facebook, or if you don't have this, just please share the story with one of your relatives, with one of your friends, one of your colleagues. This is how we will be able to make this operation continue living our minds and souls. And I think it can change the life of some people. Maybe not like we change the Syrian's life, but of course it can change. I know that the students today in the US from time to time are being attacked for being Jews, for being supporting the state of Israel. I felt it when I was in the UK and the US. I think that by sharing these kinds of stories, people, and especially the people who do not know exactly if Israel is good or bad, they didn't got their opinion yet. I'm sure that these stories will be helpful for them to understand a little bit who is the state of Israel or what is the state of Israel. It will be a huge privilege from you to me. And again, thank you very much for giving the opportunity to spend this hour with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Eyal. And I put your Twitter in the chat, so if anyone wants to go give them a follow, that's it there. Awesome. Thank you so much, Eyal. Thank you to everyone for coming out here today. Appreciate you all, and I hope everyone has a good rest of your Sunday. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
This was amazing. Eyal, thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you. Again, it was my privilege, my pleasure, and I really hope that one day I will be able to meet you face to face. If you're Jackie coming to Israel, I'm on the Upper Galil.
I would love to. Are you near like Har Arbel? Like Karov L'Sham, no?
Yeah, in Israel,
everything's close.
You know, I'm taking my car, and in 5 hours, I'm in Eilat, which is a southern city, so it's close. Har Arbel, it's like 45 to 60 minutes. So again, it's very, very close. If you're coming Israel, please, you have my phone or my email, please just send me, and I will be very happy to meet you and take you to the Golan Heights.
That would be amazing. I hope to be there over the summer, but anytime you're in Connecticut, or anytime you're in anywhere close by, we hope that you also get in touch with us. We'd love to host you.
Yeah.
Great.
I'd love to
Well,
take you to a basketball game
yeah,
too.
for sure,
But
for sure,
this
I
is
will do so.
so inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing your story, and big thank you, Gianna, for making this happen. I know there was a lot to coordinate, but it truly is our honor to have you
Yeah.
here today. And thank you for being here. Thank you for Gianna to make it all, put all the
Yeah.
pieces together to make it happen. So
Yana,
thank you.
amazing,
Yay.
amazing. I'm going to stop the recording.
Beautiful.